Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that's fascinated by all the fun and games and finances of the music world, as explained each week by me, Steve Lamack, and him, Stuart Dredge. If you want an easy guide to what's going on in the music biz and how it all works and how the figures stack up, then here we are. This week, more old songs making waves on social media. Has the American TikTok dilemma been solved? And the collapse of music print media and its financial consequences for journalists. But first, here's Stu's big stat of the week. What's your big number this week, Stuart?
75 million.
75 million is quite impressive. It refers to what exactly?
It's how many tracks Spotify has removed from its service in the last year because they were spam.
Because they were spam. I didn't know you could have musical spam. What does spam mean in this context then? What is spam?
It's that Monty Python song, you know the one? Someone uploaded it 75 million times to make a point. No, so this is spam tracks, which is, it's a thing that's become a part of the streaming landscape where people upload thousands or hundreds of thousands of tracks. It may be the same tracks, slightly with the title changed. It may be just a bunch of AI-generated music. But it's people mass uploading stuff that isn't intended to be played by humans ever. It's just put on there to either do a fraud. That's the wrong way of saying it. To commit fraud.
Yeah.
Or just clogging up the system. And this came as part of Spotify did an announcement about what some of the things it's doing around AI music. And as part of that, just halfway through this press conference went, by the way, we've removed 75 million tracks in the last year.
Crikey.
And the scale of that, like the official number, which I think is probably bigger than this now, is that Spotify has 100 million tracks on its service. Like that's been this is how much we've got. So another 75% on top of that was just landfill. And it's got rid of it. So obviously this is one of those stats where they're saying it because they want us to be impressed by it. And it is quite impressive. You know, it's like saying, we're not just letting this stuff stay up, we're getting rid of it.
Right.
So yeah.
This week's three big news stories are all quite industry-based, but worth touching on even briefly, I think. And you just mentioned Spotify announcing some wider changes designed to respond to the explosion in AI-generated music. So as part of their latest announcement, what else are they doing and why, apart from taking out the spam?
Yeah, so there were three things in this announcement last week. And the one was this new spam filter, which, I mean, I guess we're all used to the idea of spam filters in our email, aren't we? So they're the things that stop us getting all those Viagra emails being sent to us by strangers. And they've got the equivalent for stream music, where basically they're going to be detecting tracks that are uploaded, mass uploaded. So is it mass uploaded? So someone's uploaded 100,000 tracks that are all useless just to commit fraud. They'll go. So it's improving its detection technology. The other thing, and look, bear with me on this, because I think you'll listen to this and say, that sounds really boring. It does.
All right.
A new system of music credits developed by the DDEX Industry Consortium.
Right. What does that mean in English then? What does that entail?
So when you're a musician and you're uploading a song or getting ready to upload songs to Spotify or streaming services, you have to create all the metadata. So the track's title, genre, all the data. And this new system is also going to let you say how AI was used in the process, if at all. So what it will be is, for example, if you used AI-generated vocals in your songs, you'll say that. If you created some samples using AI, but then created a song yourself in a traditional way, you can say that. And if you used AI just to mix and master it, you can say that. So it's kind of, you don't just say, yes, I used AI in this song. You'll be able to say exactly how and where.
Right, and what will people necessarily do that? I mean, because given the choice, some people might think, I'm not going to fess up to this.
Well, so part of the reason behind making it a little bit more nuanced is so that people don't feel worried about it. Because I know a lot of musicians are thinking, well, my music is human music, but I used an AI to mix it. But if I say that, will it be labeled as AI generated music and no one wants to listen to it? So it avoids that. But yeah, the idea, I mean, Spotify's pitch was, we don't want to punish musicians who are using this properly in their work. But we also want to have these transparency rules so that if someone does create an AI track and doesn't fill in that data, that kind of suggests something wrong is up, and that might kind of help them take it down. So there's like a hint of a stick that if you don't use these, that kind of gives them a clue about your motivations, because they're also going to have technology to maybe detect if you have used AI.
Right.
So I think that's quite a good thing. And the idea is it's an industry standard, so it could be used by any service. The idea behind it is that everyone can use the same standard. And then eventually you'll be able to see, and you'll be able to see a song and say, "Oh, I understand how I was used here, and I'm not kind of being defrauded."
Okay.
And then the third thing was AI voice clones. We talked about this before, where like someone clones an artist's voice and then releases a song with them singing something they didn't sing. So there was a
Yeah.
famous Drake in the weekend. That's now officially barred on Spotify. It's not allowed, which isn't a big change, but just makes it official. So in the past, for example, if someone cloned an artist's voice and uploaded a track to Spotify, the label would have to complain, or the artist team, and say, "Look, that's not my artist." And then Spotify decide to take it down. It might be, whereas now it's against the rules. It comes straight down when notified. So it's kind of just firming that up.
Mm-hmm.
But while at the same time, if you're an artist and you want to do that yourself, like Grimes did, she licensed her voice out for AI so that people could use it. That's still fine. So that's allowed. And again, it's the idea of they want to support artists who are using AI in creative ways, but crack down on what they call as bad actors. So that was the kind of unifying theme here.
Okay. Story 2, and now this one has been running longer than The Archers, or for listeners outside the UK, let's say the history of the Olympics is short by comparison. This is the TikTok saga in the States. Do you want to recap the plot and what has happened this week? And I guess as well, we should also make the point, I think needs restating on a reasonably regular basis, why TikTok is just so important to the music industry at the moment.
Yeah, I'm getting this recap down to a fine art now. I think I've got it in sentence. So basically, a US law says TikTok there has to be sold or it's going to get banned. And this is all about its ownership by a Chinese company and concerns about national security in the US. And the deadline to enforce this law just keeps getting extended to figure out a way to sell TikTok US in a deal that everyone approves of. So last week, there was an executive order from the US president himself, kind of giving details of this deal that's been agreed. So the idea is TikTok US will become a new separate company, majority owned by American investors, valued at $14 billion, which sounds like a big number. But at one point, people were saying, it could be worth 40 billion.
Right.
So it's not worth quite as much as people thought early in the process. And then ByteDance, which is the Chinese company that owns TikTok now, they still own about 20% of the new company. So they'd be like a minority owner. But it might still be in charge of shopping and advertising, which is basically where the money comes from.
Right.
TikTok. So if this deal goes through, it basically means TikTok is here to stay in the US. And that means that all the artists and all the labels who have made it a really big part of their marketing plans just carry on using it. They don't need a plan B, which they kind of have been doing anyway. Every time the deadline got extended, people got less panicked about this prospect of it closing down there. But there are a couple of dark clouds hovering over this, which I kind of thought might be quite to talk about. The first thing is, like, so far it's only the White House saying this deal's been agreed. So basically you've got President Trump's word saying, I talked to the Chinese president and he approves this deal. But the Chinese authorities have been really conspicuously silent so far in public. And a few Chinese newspapers saying, well, this will depend on the US delivering on its promises. So it's not entirely certain this has actually been agreed and approved. And there is a scenario where China says, actually, no, we don't like this deal. And then Trump possibly throws his toys out the pram, shuts down TikTok in the US, and everyone panics again and has to find something else to use. I mean, that seems like the unlikeliest outcome, but it is still possible. But the other thing, and this is, so I have to get a bit political. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to rely on how you look to say if I'm going too far. So this deal was pushed through by Trump and the Vice President, J.D. Vance. They played a big role in sort of figuring out this. And a tech firm called Oracle is going to be running TikTok, or play a big role in running TikTok in the US. And that company's boss is a big backer of Trump. And the new owners, they're going to have control of like TikTok's recommendation algorithm in the US, so how it decides what to show people, and also its content moderation decisions, so who gets banned, who gets promoted. Mm-hmm. And people are starting to say around the edges, hang on a minute, like there's a lot of stuff being talked about in the US about kind of censorship and the media. So there was the Jimmy Kimmel late night talk show recently got taken off the air, kind of under pressure from one of Trump's regulation buddies. And so now people are starting to realize, hang on a minute, if buddies of the president are going to be in control of TikTok, which has like more than 180 million users in the US, it's big, it's really big. What if this deal starts to turn it into this politicized space? So where there's a lot of far right-wing rhetoric, conspiracy theories, and like you don't have to look too far for an example of that, because that's what's happened. That's what people have said has happened to X, formerly Twitter, since Elon Musk bought it. And what happened to X was a lot of musicians left it or have retreated from it because of the kind of culture change there. And I think that's the danger of TikTok here, that if it gets saved in the US, but if it becomes this kind of MAGA Musk hellscape, which is just me worrying, really. But there's a potential of a similar drain. If artists say, hang on a minute, we don't feel comfortable here anymore, we're going to go elsewhere. So that is the people are just starting to talk about it. Like a lot of the headlines about TikTok's being saved, hurrah. But people are starting to say, hang on a minute, how are its new owners going to run it? And what will that mean for artists who aren't on board with the current political regime in the US?
Okay. Story 3, and this, I guess, bears some relation to TikTok and other social platforms, but more news this week of more old tracks finding a new life on social media. Billie Eilish's breakthrough hit from 2015 is top of the YouTube Shorts chart, while there's a Rihanna album track from 2007, which is back in the charts as well, thanks to, as we've just been saying, to TikTok.
Yeah, it's just, this is like we could probably do a story every week with different songs. But yeah, this week, so do you remember, did you ever see Ocean Eyes? It was like the first Billie Eilish track to blow up on SoundCloud, I think.
Right. No, I didn't. Not at the time.
So it's pre her publicly being on a big label. But yeah, it's top of the YouTube Shorts chart. So YouTube Shorts, if anyone doesn't know, that's kind of YouTube's TikTok equivalent. So short videos people can make and put songs in them. And Ocean Eyes was the most popular song used for videos in the recent week of 12th to 18th September. So, and then the song went back into the top 100 on YouTube Music. And it's just, as far as I can tell, it's a random trend where people are making YouTube Shorts videos showing off their eyes. And thus the track Ocean Eyes seemed to fit, which is kind of, it sounds quite like they could have chosen anything. Could have done Eye of the Tiger, Your Lying Eyes, like lots of songs with eyes in. And here you go. And this is going to be making Billie Eilish money because her song is getting a viral spike.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about this. What is the financial uplift? Because I can't remember now. I should know these figures, but as an artist, what would you be getting paid for plays on YouTube Shorts or on TikTok, or does the presence on those platforms, does it lead to increased figures elsewhere on the streaming services, and that's where the money is?
That's where the money is. I mean, the money, you do get royalties for stuff being used on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, but the money is small, and the music industry regularly moans about it. But what happens, and this is one of those trends that I think we need more research into to understand exactly how big it can be. But if your track goes viral on one of these platforms, it goes up the charts and gets more streams elsewhere. And as we said before, I think in the UK, the ballpark figure in the past has been 1 million streams, was about 5,000 quid. But then you might only see 20% of that as an artist in your contract. So, 1 million streams, maybe 1,000 quid.
Right.
So if a thing takes off on YouTube Shorts and you get 10 million extra streams, then that's like significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the same with Rihanna. So this Rihanna track, I love the Rihanna story because this is a track called Breaking Dishes by Rihanna. And it's about cheating men, basically. That's the theme of it. And people are using that on TikTok to soundtrack videos about cheating men. Like, they're kind of calling out their ex-boyfriends. They're kind of, but the best one I saw was someone saying, "My man cheated, but I've only got plastic dishes," and it's them throwing the dishes on the floor and then bouncing all over the kitchen. And so basically, what happens is someone used this song and did a really cool video. Other people saw it, followed suit, and then once it starts trending, everyone jumps on the bandwagon because that's how these platforms work. Like, if you are someone trying to make money from your TikTok videos, you're on top of what's trending today, and like, right, I better do a video with that song in it because that's what's trending. So it's, again, Rihanna, this song, which was an album track, is now in the main top 100 in the US for the first time, and it came out 18 years ago. I'm trying to add it up. So yeah, I mean, it seems organic. Like this is a case of a viral craze starting and spreading. But I think increasingly labels are going to be saying, right, how do we make this happen? Like, how do we take this decades-old album track, find something in the lyrics that could be a really good hook, and then how do we get people to start using it? How do we pay influencers to start doing it? So we're going to get these stories. And the thing I'm looking for now is when I hear these stories, is it completely organic, or is it something that a label has kicked into gear in a
Yeah,
given
that's
campaign?
planted the idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get you. Any other business this week? I know we're going to answer a question from one of our listeners, Richard. Before we get to that, though, can we start with the latest from the frontline filing debate, which started when I mentioned having a conversation with one of the lovely staff at Resident Records in Brighton about where you file PJ Harvey, under P or H. I'm very much in the H camp myself, but we are indebted to listener Anna, who commented on Spotify, refiling dilemmas. I was in Resident Records today and can confirm PJ Harvey is filed under H. Their filing was consistent, so that must be reassuring. It is. Thank you very much, Anna. Well, just when we thought we might be getting towards the end of this thread, then producer Joe has just raised the issue of Elton John. E or J? Should be J. Doesn't look right under J. It should be J, though. Should it? I'll tell you what, we'll come back. I mean, there's
Yeah,
more discussions we had.
I think J, but I said P for PJ Harvey, and I say J. So I'm not sure I've got any consistency. That's why I wouldn't get a job in Resident Records. They just kick me out.
I think we may return to this in this week's edition of The Lock-In, when we can also do that preposterous theory about the Beach Boys and the Beatles. We'll come to that later. Here's the question, though, from another of our followers, Richard Bowes. Thank you, Richard, for getting in touch. He says, "Hi, everyone. Loyal patron here. I'm a music journalist / writer for Clash, Louder Than War, and Live Forever. They're all, for anyone who doesn't know, big music websites. As a writer for all these, I've previously worked as well for Gigwise before it folded last year, and I've interviewed some fairly big names, including Shaun Ryder, Tim Burgess, Royal Blood, and Frank Turner, but I've never been paid a penny for this work. I don't do it for the money, clearly. I do it for the love and interest in speaking to people about music. But it struck me," says Richard, "that with the likes of Q Magazine and NME folding in the last few years, there's very little print media, certainly in the UK. It's Mojo, Uncut, Kerrang and Rolling Stone, but they're the only music magazines which are certainly the only ones available in supermarkets. And even then, they're largely special editions about specific bands. The recent integration of Pitchfork into GQ met with some outcry, but the dial hasn't moved. It would be interesting to hear how the money was distributed when Steve was a journalist in comparison to nowadays. It strikes me that journalism and writing is a key part of the music industry infrastructure, but those paid for it are few and far between." So thank you, Richard. I mean, it's a massive question, this. When I started thinking about it, I mean, there's one or two tangents you could go off down, I think, from this. So I've got two or three different bits of answers to your question or to your point. I guess in answer to the question about payment in the old days, I mean, obviously it's more than 30 years ago now since I left the New Musical Express. But at the time, the circulation was around about 110 to 120,000 copies a week. I think that's roughly how much we were selling. So anyway, because it's quite a long time, my memory of what you get paid is a bit fuzzy. I do remember, though, that while, a lot of people talk about being paid by word count, at the NME, you were paid by the inch. So you got paid for how much space your article actually took up in the paper. But at the time, as I say, these are very rough figures, but a minor live review, your average live review, would probably pay you about £25. A lead review, 50, 60, maybe. I mean, the letters page, that's what you want. Letters page paid, I think, about £80, which is a lot of money in them days. I mean, those things were the saving grace for freelancers. Doing the singles page or the letters page, that was a decent bit of money. But obviously, but the point was, I guess, from if you picked up enough work, you could make a living as a freelancer. As I say, if you could pick up just about enough work, a live review and an album review every week, maybe the letters page, a feature, particularly as you work your way up to longer form features, then you could. I mean, you're not going to live in a palace, but you could do all right out of it. And I think the other point to be made is obviously the fact that there was so little alternative music on national radio at the time, except for John Peel, and of course later we did the evening session. But the weekly papers had a lot of clout at that point. And, we sort of, quite often you could see a music paper or the set of music papers, there were the three, Melody Maker Sounds and the NME, would set the agenda, really. And in some cases, they were the only place where certain artists could catch a break. There was nowhere else for a new band to get mentioned, really. And that was why the music industry were more than keen on throwing money at the music papers. Major labels, we might come back into this in the lock-in as well, but major labels at the time, I worked at the NME between 87 and 92, but I know this went on through quite a lot of the 90s as well. They'd always be flying journalists off to America or Europe just to interview a band and buy a journalist drinks to get their artists in the paper. So as I say, I mean, I'm not saying everyone made a mint, but most people had, made a reasonable living, okay, just above living wage living, and had a very good time, I think. I mean, the other thing, so the reason I can't tell you exactly what some of the payments were to freelancers, because I was on staff my entire career at the NME, starting off as news editor, but then I became live editor. Where I have to say, not a month would go by without, needing to sub one or two of my stringers the price of a pint or two before they all went off to Record and Tape Exchange to flog their records to pay us back.
Well, that was the other way of making money, wasn't it? Selling off your stuff.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. But yeah, but being on staff, you get a monthly paycheck for the job you did. As I say, I was live editor for a while, so I got paid for being live editor, and didn't get anything extra for any of the articles or reviews which I wrote, because you were on staff and everything came under your wage. And I wrote loads. I mean, a lot of staff members, we wrote loads. Again, it's exactly the same as you. Not because we wanted to make money out of it, because we wanted to meet bands and see gigs, and what we were essentially doing, trying to corrupt a nation's musical taste by getting our opinions in print to as many people as possible. Although I tell you one thing, though, the other thing about being on staff and how it relates to payment, anything you wrote, not only did you not get paid for it, it was also owned by the publisher. And I guess probably still is. So anytime NME reuses or reprints my review of Nevermind by Nirvana, don't see a penny. Don't see a penny extra. I mean, obviously it's nice, that people still refer to it. But in the same way that, particularly during the 70s, 80s, 90s, that bands did record deals where they signed away all their rights, so it turns out did we, the staff journalists of the time. But anyway, that's how it was. I left in October 92, which I guess was just as the clouds were coming over the horizon, really, because the problem, obviously, for weekly music magazines from the mid-late 90s onwards ends up being the internet. And here's one of the reasons why. While I was at the NME, during my 5 years there, they conducted at different times readership surveys. I think there were two while I was there, asking people who bought the paper, actual people who bought the paper, why do you buy the paper? What was the number one answer? Why? What did people buy the New Musical Express for, Stuart?
Gig listings.
Exactly that. Gig Guide was top. If it wasn't Gig Guide, it was news. Gig Guide and news pages were the top two reasons why people bought the NME. At number, I think it was 3 or 4, the third or fourth reason why do you buy the New Musical Express? The crossword. And so, I mean, obviously this was quite bruising to all our egos, the writers' egos. But features basically came, features and new bands, they come right down the list. And so, of course, the internet comes along and the papers lose their exclusivity to the news. All the things, the reasons why people actually bought the music papers. I mean, I'm not saying people bought the NME, read the news and threw it away. Obviously, then read other bits and pieces. But news was so key that, with news breaking all the time, by the time the music papers came out, that news was out of date. And that's the first thing that starts undermining the music papers. And concurrent with that is the change in the way that the music industry decided it was going to market and advertise its artists. Because what keeps all magazines alive is advertising revenue. The actual size of the NME, when we sat in a editorial meeting on a Tuesday, you would find out, and you'd have an average size, but size of the paper could go up and down depending on how many ads have been sold for that week. So it's quite reliant on advertising. Both we used to have those big page ads for new albums, but also if you remember the music papers from back then, acres, absolutely acres and acres of live ads for gigs and tours. And as the industry over the years moves to new models, advertising or marketing spend starts to go elsewhere. And the industry decides maybe we'll directly market to fans instead of advertising in these papers. And this was the slippery slope, which started with street teams and, being endless flyers being given out outside gigs, and leads us to where we are now, where marketing will involve TikTok or whatever, and bands can publicly announce their gigs on their social media. So advertising for print media slowly starts to collapse. And of course, then as well as the sales begin to dip, because people are getting their news somewhere else, then that affects your ad revenue, because you can charge more for an ad in a paper selling 120,000 copies a week than you can in a paper selling 80,000 copies a week. And so it goes as the circulation begins to slide. And then one by one, the papers started to fold. I mean, even those who survived, like the NME survived online, even those publications have had to shift their editorial in order to attract enough readers and hence enough advertisers to prolong their existence. And that's kind of where we are. I mean, I haven't touched on broadsheet journalism, where there is some good long form writing. But I do think I think it's sad we don't have a weekly publication that covers music across different genres. But and the magazines that have survived, the reason they've survived is because they've identified a particular part of the audience and they sell to that part of the audience, and because they're specialized in a certain genre or demographic, that's also a decent target point for advertisers who still want to spend money, because they know exactly who they're advertising to, and there's a reason for them to carry on. And that's why certain magazines, some of the ones that you mentioned, Richard, are still around. But I mean, one of the things I really miss is the big cover stories about up and coming artists, newish artists, because I mean, one, they're often really colourful and entertaining and gave a writer a chance to theorise about music in general. You got more inside the mind of the band, and you don't have that anymore. I think the other thing about them was, but papers like the NME and Melody Maker, they did quite often take bands to task as well, and they would ask them difficult questions, and would occasionally slate a record, absolutely pile on a record when a band had made a terrible record. And all this, I think, helped filter out what was interesting and who wasn't interesting, because there'd been much more debate about it or thought gone into it, and there's a different, there's a divergence of opinion as well. I always said, the Tuesday NME editorial meeting, which would be the staff and maybe leading freelancers, it was like getting 12, and everyone liked different sorts of music. It was like putting 12 musicians in a studio and asking them to make a record together. That was how we put the NME together, and why we covered so many different types of music and had such a range of opinions. You could walk from one end to the office, and the bands who were really popular at one end were the devils incarnate by the time you got to the other end of the office. So yeah, here we are. So we're left with still some really good writers, but without the openings as much. They're magazines, as mentioned, broadsheets, but in a lot of cases, journalists don't have the space to really go to town on an article. And places where they do, and there are decent websites as well, but they are maybe a little marginalised or just simply overlooked by a lot of people because the audience has moved on. And, in some cases, a lot of people are happy enough with a potted history of a band, and that will do them. But yeah, I think, actually writing and creating ideas. I mean, the whole idea of musical genres now is, we used to just come up with in the pub on a Wednesday, you'd come up with a genre, and something would be happening 2 weeks' time, and that was a way of then, even something like Britpop is a way of
Mm,
selling loads of records for the industry. But yeah, I'd love it if there were more. I'd love it if there were more journalistic characters and gatekeepers
mm,
who could have paid careers, because you need people with, an instinctive or experienced overview to help make sense, particularly now, because we need people to help us make sense of the muddle that is music these days. So, I mean, to come to your last point, Richard, yeah, is music writing still key? And I guess the brutal answer is it is for some fans. It's not for all fans. But, who knows? I mean, this generation, who knows? We might see a revival in print in the same way that there's a revival in vinyl. I mean, it would take a lot of investment and the buy-in of, the music biz for that to happen. But you never know. What does everyone think? You can drop us a line, by the way, the price of music podcast at gmail.com if you've got any thoughts on this. What about you, Stuart? Because you did a week at the Enemy at one point, and you were a fan of the music papers, and probably from your side of the desk as well. You probably know a bit about the economics of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think just after you left was when I started reading the weeklies, because it was about 1993 or so, and they played a huge role. And like you say, I didn't mean to say gig listening to flipping, because I read it from cover to cover. But that was where you found out who was playing, and you found out there was either a news story or you went back and saw someone was touring. As like yesterday, for example, Super Furry Animals just announced a tour, and it was every other ad in my Facebook feed was Super Furry Animals, and
Mm,
that's how I found it. But yeah, I mean, I think the weird thing for me is that um, journalists did move online and try to figure out the model for it. Like Pitchfork's a good example that for a long time was like, this is the successor, isn't it, to the press?
yes.
But and there were sites like Drowned in Sound here, but I feel like I can't think of one of those sites that hasn't struggled with the economics of it, because they were advertising driven, and all the advertising money online is really going to Google and Meta. It's not going to individual websites, and everyone is
Mm,
figuring out how do we make money. So it's not that journalists didn't move with the times and do this stuff online. It's just that the economics of that really have been tough. Um, I mean, the other thing I wondered is streaming is a factor maybe in not, you can go and listen to anything at the click of a button now. And maybe people don't have that sense of, I need to read a review. I need to know if it's good, because you can just like it up. But the difference is you need someone to point you towards the stuff you might like. But
mm.
there's all kinds of content there's algorithms doing that. There's curators and playlisters. Um, and that's the other thing I was thinking a lot about, because I think something I've noticed recently with Spotify particularly is they've always had a bunch of humans doing their playlists. So whatever big players on Spotify you think of, there is a human picking it, curating it. And they are that kind of tastemaker gatekeeper saying, this is brilliant, I want to bring it to people's ears. But
Mm.
they haven't been public facing. It was always like, this is Spotify's blah, blah playlist. But this year, they've changed that a bit. They've started giving those people a profile. They're appearing in videos. They're on the thing. It's almost like they've said, actually, we need to put the humans at the forefront a bit again, so you know who it is who's
Yeah, I
recommending
mean
stuff.
that is something that we miss, isn't it? That if you started following a writer on the music papers that you found had a
Mm,
similar music taste, if they wrote about a record, even one you'd never heard, you might trust them and go out and buy it just because of that. But I think
mm,
what I'm saying is, that music journalism at its best, and why writers should get paid, is because they can explain what's important about
mm,
that music in a way sometimes I would struggle to find words for. Or
mm,
they can give you they can set the context around a band, and draw in various facets of what they're about and paint amazing pictures. and that's kind of what I miss really. And again, it's fine. The algorithm thing is fine, but it doesn't really say these artists all have the same outlook on music. They all fit together. There's something going on here. It takes someone to be able to sift through all the music that you get and go, I think this is a thing and this is important. And that's why that's the era of the paid journalist. Was really good for that.
And that's the other thing I've been thinking about, because there is an argument, I think, that the next Steve Lamacq or the next kind of musicians, they probably are a kid on TikTok making videos talking about that stuff. Like there's probably someone who has as passionate and knowledgeable about music as you were and your contemporaries, but they're also really good at making short videos and talking to camera and like navigating their way through TikTok's algorithm. So they're out there, but they're not writing like 1,000-word reviews or interviews. And as those people build a following, so they come onto the radar of the music industry and get that chance to go interview bands. And it's kind of interesting. I was who was it? I think, was it Nicki Minaj? Like there's a Twitch streamer who's really popular who does these 3-hour-long shows and has artists on, and they come and basically sit in his studio with him and chat and hang out and perform. Mm. And again, that's more TV than it is journalism, but that's where artists are going, well, actually, let's go and do that and sit down. And so the exciting thing here is it's a new way of kind of that passion, putting music in front of people. Yeah. But the economics of it can be a bit dodgy. Not dodgy, but they can be troubling for me. Like I interviewed a couple of people in that area last year who work with influencers and music influencers. And basically what happens if you get big, labels can start to pay you to talk about an artist or a track they're promoting. So you make your money by getting paid by the label to do the promotion. And the argument is always, well, we don't take money to promote anything that we don't really like. Which is probably that's an age-old thing, isn't it? I wouldn't take money to promote something shit, only good stuff. But it is a little bit to me, because I grew up in print world where someone might book an ad in your magazine. Your ad person would come and say, oh, hi, someone has booked an ad. Could they get a review? And your review goes, no, fuck off. That's not how we work. Or because that was a separation, commercial and editorial. Yeah. Whereas now I think when you're in that world of influencers, you're dealing directly with the companies who want you to promote stuff. And so I'm not in any doubt there's a world of people out there who are going to be the journalists of this era in that form. But the economics of that mean they have to deal directly with people who want to pay them to promote stuff. And it's a bit of a minefield to walk through, especially if you are just a young person going, wow, I love music and now someone wants to pay me for it. Mm-hmm. But I'm interested to follow that, see how it goes.
At least it'll be a human, because our and finally story this week, not just Spotify now who are replacing humans with AI DJs. Now it's YouTube Music apparently are testing this idea out as well.
Yeah, you're getting a little cold breeze of.
Can you see how I had to sit back from the microphone and take stock of the world? What's happening here?
Yeah, so we've talked about Spotify's AIG before. It's like an AI that basically introduces tracks. These next few tracks are from this genre or theme, or this artist is so-and-so.
Yeah.
And so YouTube is testing this too, and it described them as AI music hosts designed to deepen your listening experience by sharing relevant stories, fan trivia, and fun commentary about your favorite music on YouTube Music app. Which, in my heart of hearts, I want a human doing that. I don't want an AI, because I grew up with humans doing that for me. I grew up with the evening session and so on. But maybe this is the way the world is going and no one will care, in which case it makes sense. So what I do think, though, is whenever I hear this stuff, I think the whole thing about AI now is it can hallucinate. And isn't that a worry? Like, what happens when it introduces a track by a favorite artist and says, well, at the weekends, they go to Nazi memorabilia conferences and shoot horses. And then no one knows it's happened because it's only said to one person. But it does make me wonder what's the kind of the thing. But yeah, so this seems to be a fact of a landscape. People are saying, right, how we want to have more context. And that's a good thing, I think. Like, rather than just a song starts playing in the stream service, you get someone saying to you, oh, we thought you might like this because this is a band called blah, they're from here. if you like them, check out blah.
Yeah, I know. It's just so basic, isn't it? They're just coming back to the journalism argument. You've got to do better than that. I mean, just saying this is a band from this town and there's another band from this town. Here's a band from this genre. This band sound a bit like them. That's not real. That's not. It's not bringing you anything. It's not bringing you anything like the thoughts of an insightful actual journalist. Anyway, as I say,
But also the passion. Like when someone on the radio, what I love is someone saying this track's brilliant. Like that's what you look for humans for. Is like not just someone saying you may like this because blah blah blah. Like someone saying this is great, you should listen to it.
I think the only problem with that, and with regards to mainstream radio, is that everything is brilliant these days.
It's true.
We're out of time for this week. Thank you very much for listening. If you are enjoying what we're trying to do here, please do help us spread the word. Tell your friends, leave us a review online if you get a chance. Alternatively, you can support us via Patreon. In fact, if you sign up to be a super fan, you do get an extra 15 minutes or so of me and him chatting about music and money and embarrassing stories from our past. This week, we'll probably pick up on some of the points from that journalism debate. Also, why not buying tickets in advance is having a terrible effect on bands touring, and the promotion of live shows will do that. In the lock-in this week, can we just say hello and welcome to new superfans G Wood, bless you, and Karen. Don't have your second name, Karen, but thank you very much. If you'd like to join them and us, as I say, for the weekly lock-in, become a superfan of the show at patreon.com/thepriceofmusic. Alternatively, if you'd just like to get in touch with us, you can use our socials or send us an email with any queries, anything you don't understand about how the industry works. Drop us a line. We'll see what we can do. We'll be answering some more of your questions over the coming weeks. The Price of Music podcast at gmail.com. Till next time, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.
Goodbye.